As a startup founder, we often fall in the trap of creativity and innovation, and we try and chase different ideas to make our product and services more compelling. This is known as a Fox strategy, which is more versatile and dynamic. On the other hand, Hedgehog is a strategy which focuses on building on a single big idea guided by a very specific long term vision. There's nothing wrong in both these strategies. In fact, both of these are essential for long term sustainability of a business. But knowing when to adopt these strategies is key to winning. In this course, titled The Hedgehog and the Fox, we will explore both these strategies in more detail and suggest the right approach for businesses based on which stage and industry they are in. Stay tuned. There's an ancient saying which goes by the fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows only one thing. Now, the fox, as we know, is a very cunning animal and it devises different strategies to catch its prey, hedgehog being one of its favorite preys. Hedgehog, on the other hand, is a very simplistic animal. It doesn't have any special skills. It cannot outrun a fox. So the only thing it knows and it does is where every single time is whenever it sees a life-threatening issue, rolls into a ball with its spikes out, and that's the only thing that saves it every single time. Isaiah Berlin, one of the famous philosophers and authors, wrote an essay on this titled The Hedgehog and the Fox. And in that essay, he represents the traits of fox and hedgehog and compares some of the leading thinkers and philosophers of that time in these two categories. For example, as per Berlin, foxes represent thinkers who embrace diversity, more complexity of the world, and they see different issues and different diversities and try to blend them in into their character or the way they write and so on and so forth. Now, Hedgehog, on the other hand, represents a set of thinkers who are very simplistic in nature, and they usually have a single overarching vision or an overarching idea or principle, and that's what they use to guide their entire philosophy. Now, you might still be thinking, what has this got to do with a business strategy? So in the business context, Foxes represents a business strategy which emphasizes on adaptability, dynamic growth, being able to change as per different market trends, and hence this is a more dynamic and a unique technique. A hedgehog strategy, on the other hand, focuses on a single vision, a single overarching idea or principle, and the basic idea of hedgehog concept is to build on the core strength. Now, building on this further, Jim Collins, in his book Good to Great, wrote extensively about the hedgehog concept. And he classifies three different areas which kind of come together in defining the hedgehog concept for any company or individual. It starts with passion. So, what are you deeply passionate about? What is that one thing that really drives you? Second is being the best at in terms of your capabilities. So, what's your core capability and what can you be the best at compared to rest of the world? And lastly, economics. So, what is that key economic driver that fuels your business growth? Now, a merger of all these three is where the hedgehog concept lies. And as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a CEO, this is something that you need to find and discover for yourself. Now, before we go deep into each of these areas, let's take a quick example of Amazon. And the obvious question here is Amazon a fox or a hedgehog? Now, let's break this down further. Amazon, as we know, is a global company with many different business units. And some of the business units are listed here. Now, this is a bit dated study. I think this is from 2019. But nevertheless, the trends are similar in terms of revenue contributions of these business units and so on. Now, when it comes to the core business, which is Amazon.com, that generates over 50% of the business. It's a cash cow business in terms of a BCG matrix. What that means is this is where bulk of the revenue is coming from. They may not be hugely profitable in this line of business, but this is what runs the shop day in and day out. So that's a cash cow business for them, and they have sustained it for many, many years now. The second line of business, which falls in terms of the overall contribution, is third-party services. So this includes commissions, advertisements, shipping fees, and so on. This contributes to roughly 20% of the business. It's a star business, which means it's a high profit margin and a high growth business, and they're looking to constantly evolve this further. The next category is Amazon Web Services. As we know, it's one of the leaders in the space of cloud computing. In fact, one of the top 3 cloud computing providers in the world. In terms of Amazon business, it just contributes to about 12% of the overall business, but it has a huge market share. And again, this is a star business because they make a lot of money off this. It's hugely profitable, and they continue to invest and scale this. The next is physical stores, roughly about 6% of the market. It's an emerging market category because they are competing against some of the giants in the space, and being in a physical location itself is a challenge. And some of the wider known hypermarkets like Walmart and Kroger have cracked this code, and they've been in the business for many, many years now. So it's a tough spot to be in, but nevertheless, that's one area that Amazon feels strategically they want to be in, and they're trying different ideas such as digital stores, contactless payments, even VR experience. That's something that they tried past few years. Amazon Prime by itself is not a huge profit-making business. It's a profit driver, but that enables some of the other businesses like .com. And lastly, advertisements and some of the other services are a loss leader, which means they are still in the portfolio, but they're not making a huge margin or a huge revenue. And strategically, again, they have decided to be there. Now, the idea is not to study each one of these businesses in detail, but the idea that we're trying to portray here is that not every business is as successful, but Amazon, being the behemoth, is able to sustain and drive this for various reasons that they have gone into these different avenues. But they didn't start like that. They started as a hedgehog, meaning the core marketplace business, which is started with selling books, ended up being a marketplace for every single product being sold globally. So that's the core business, and they operate that as a hedgehog, and they continue to innovate in that, continue to streamline logistics, streamline supply chain, continue to work on customer experience, and that's what sustains them. So each of these businesses, although Amazon by itself looks like a fox, but they operate like a hedgehog for each of the specific business unit, right? So Amazon is a specific case study, which is a combination of both of these. Now, is that the right approach for every single startup? Let's analyze that further and see where that takes us. If you remember the concept introduced by Jim Collins in his book Good to Great, Hedgehog is an overlay of three different areas, which is passion, capability, and your economic strength. Let's understand passion in a bit more detail. Now, the question you need to ask here is, what ignites your deepest enthusiasm and commitment? Now, there could be various reasons and various different factors that drive this. I've listed some of them here, and let's analyze that quickly. Wealth creation. Now, there could be someone who is passionate about creating wealth, trying to be independent, wants to move out of their daily 9 to 5 job. So that could be a motivating factor for them. The other factor could be someone wants to impact people's lives. So they're really passionate about people and the way they manage. Maybe they're good or excellent leaders, and they want to cascade that back to the society. So impacting people's life could be another area that may drive passion for somebody. Someone might be really good at innovation and tech, so that's something that may drive them to create something as a tech product or as a service and so on. It could be social causes, so you might be deeply passionate about environmental issues or other social causes, so you might want to start a nonprofit or work in an organization that can support these social causes. Or another example could be education. So a lot of people feel that the education system is broken and they want to try different ways of transforming the education system. It could be an online academy, it could be different ways of addressing with new training methodologies, tools and techniques, AI, and so on and so forth. So that could be one area in which someone wants to work on, right? So these could be the defining factors for your passion. Let's take a quick example in this case. Let's say I want to launch a fitness business and I feel I'm deeply passionate about that. Now, to go through the entire ideation process, one of the tools and techniques that we can use is a technique called as 5 whys. In this, you ask 5 different why questions to any concept that you have. And so long as you're getting answers for each of these five and they make sense and they are logical, it means you have a clear vision and strategy. So any idea that you get, be it a business idea or anything else, if you want to really ideate and see if you feel strongly about it, test it against these 5 whys, right? So let's ask the first why. Why do I want to launch a fitness business? The simple answer could be, I want to help people get fit. Okay, makes sense. Let's ask the second why. Why do I want to do this? It could be because many people struggle with health issues, and we have seen the rate of obesity in the US or across the world, and we know it's a big problem to solve, and I want to do my part in solving the problem. It's a fair answer. Let's get to the next why. Why do I want to do this? The other reason could be people don't know where to start. There's so much information on the web, and we see advertisements of gyms and everything else everywhere across. So there are YouTube channels, there are Instagram shorts which says a healthy diet may get you into shape, or the right regime of workout would get you into shape. So there are so many different ideas floating out there. There's yoga, there is different types of diet, there's intermittent fasting and whatnot. By the way, none of that works if you're really lazy, but that's another issue. Now, because of that, because so much information is out there, people don't know where to start, right? So that could be a problem that I'm trying to solve where I want to make it simple, accessible for someone. Let's ask the next why. Why do I want to do this? It could be because the fitness industry is overwhelming, right? There are so many different options. Again, I don't know where to start, but also I don't know what to choose from. I could be spoiled for choice, or I just could be too many things which are going on and I can't make a decision. Or let's ask why you want to do this again. And maybe the last answer I'll get out of all this is I really want to make fitness accessible to everybody. Now, since I've answered all my five whys, passion statement could be something like this. I want to provide accessible I want to provide accessible and affordable fitness solutions for beginners. It's a clear statement. It's not a mission or a vision statement, but with this, you can further build on. So once you have clarified your passion, once you have clarified what your strategy is, now you can define what's the right vision for this and right mission for this, and then get into the execution plan. Now, let's get into the second category, which is achieving excellence or capability. And the question you want to ask here is, what can you or your team or your organization do which is better than everybody else, right? A lot of people are doing a lot of different things, and you might be in a category where there is already competition. Now, what makes you different is a question that you need to ask. Now, there is no scientific formula for this question. It's an ideation process that you need to undergo and understand. Now, the question that you need to ask here is, what can your team, your organization, or you can do, and you can do it better than everybody else. And in doing so, you need to be brutally honest with yourself. That's the first step. Without that, like when you're in a meeting with your co-founders in the early stages of your startup, you have to be really honest and ask this question to each other. The product or the service that you're trying to get into, whether you will end up manufacturing products or you will end up creating services, can you truly differentiate yourself from others? Differentiation. Now, this differentiation is not in terms of features or pricing and so on. It's in terms of the quality of the product or the service itself. Now, are you truly better than everybody else in this? That's a question you need to ask yourself. The next thing you want to evaluate is your strengths and weaknesses. So list them down. Let's list what are the strengths which will help you achieve this objective, and list what could be the possible weakness or possible barriers to this, right? Now, the weaknesses can always be overcome with various different strategies. If it's due to lack of resources, you can invest. If it's due to technological challenges, you can revisit your tech strategy so that the challenges can be overcome, but your strengths cannot be created out of the box, right? So you need to have some core strengths to in order to start initially, and that's something that you need to understand clearly. And once you understand your strengths, you need to double down and specialize your strengths. So you need to pull in all your resources to make sure that your strengths are aligned with your company's vision, with your objective, both short term and long term. And that is something that will help you achieve your goals. Lastly, you need to align your focus and resources based on your strengths. So you need to make sure that you're not wasting resources or you're not coming up with different ideas and trying to do different things. So once you have understood what are you best in the world at compared to everybody else, you need to double down on your strengths and you need to align all your resources to make sure that your strengths are enhanced to support that objective. Let's move on further. And the third category is sustainable revenue. So what is that one factor which drives sustainable revenue for your organization? Now, the question that needs to be answered here is, what's your key economic driver? Now, this is different than your regular P&L, right? Your P&L will suggest the health of the business in the current state. So it might indicate what are your current sales, what is your current cost, what's your current profit. You can even project it out a few months, quarter wise for the rest of the year and so on. But it doesn't indicate the health of your business. What it indicates is how is your business doing right now. So what you need to understand and clearly differentiate is what is that one key economic driver which will help you sustain in the long run. There could be many different drivers, which could be the core KPIs from a revenue perspective. You need to identify what's the right KPI for your business. So this exercise is not to help you identify that KPI, but we will lay out a process by which you can get to that stage. So firstly is understanding the economic engine. So understanding that key driver that directly influences your profitability. I'll give you a few examples in a moment to see what could be those revenue drivers. Secondly, aligning revenue with your core business. So you have to make sure that your current revenue streams and your future revenue streams, they align with your core expertise and core business. Now, you might be generating some side revenue from some other channels. For example, I opened up a coffee shop and I'm sourcing the best coffee in the world, and I have the best barista, the best machines, and that's how I'm creating quality coffee compared to some of the other chains. So I'm getting a lot of traffic, a lot of footfalls, and a lot of customers are happy with my products. Now I've started packaging that coffee in a nice fancy boxes, and I've wrapped it nicely, and I'm putting some extra goodies along with it, and I'm selling that at the counter whenever some customers are coming to buy my coffee products. Now, this could be a good revenue stream, but it doesn't align with your core strategy, because your core strategy was to open up an experience shop where people can come in, sit, hang out, socialize, and have good coffee while doing that. Now, that experience is your long-term vision, but selling products off the shelf may not be your long-term vision, but it's making good money, right? You can have that as a revenue channel, but you cannot focus all your resources to now making that experience better and neglecting and ignoring your core business. Now, if you feel at some point that it's making more sense for you to be in that business versus the traditional business that you thought of initially, it's okay to switch. And at that point, pull in all your resources into growing that business. But do not be confused and try to sail in two different boats, because then what will happen is your resources will get stretched out, your focus will get divided, and you wouldn't know where to put the focus and your resources on, right? So that's a trap you need to avoid. Thirdly, you need to look at long-term sustainability over short-term revenue. Now, taking the same example again, if you try to run some promos or marketing campaigns, you start getting a lot of traffic and revenue from some of the other channels, it could be a short-term revenue channel for you, but may not be long-term. So you need to understand if that's making sense and that's the strategy you want to continue taking. Lastly, balancing growth and profitability, right? So the rate at which you're growing, is that profitable enough? Can you sustain your profitability over a period of time with the same growth? So you need to avoid the trap of growing revenue at the cost of profitability. Taking the same example, if you invest a lot on marketing campaigns, that's giving you good customer base and good traction. And initially for your business, you might think that growing your customer base is more important. So yes, in the initial days, you might want to invest some money in that. But can it sustain as a long-term strategy? Maybe not. So that's something that you need to balance it out. So these are the few call-outs, right? Now take the same example of fitness business. In terms of aligning revenue with core business, if your core business was setting up a fitness shop locally and making sure the experience is good and people are getting what they want, so then in that case, your model would be revenue per subscriber or revenue per user. But now, if you try and open multiple different fitness locations across the city or across the nation, in that case, now you're investing heavily on real estate. And now you need to change your measurement from revenue per customer to revenue per square foot, right? Because now real estate is a uh, costly affair, and then you need to balance that out with your revenue. In terms of long-term sustainability, you need to avoid the trap on not focusing on customer retention and loyalty. This is the whole separate discussion, so I'll not hone in too much on this. So what you need to do is from the beginning, you need to have a very clear strategy on customer loyalty and customer retention. This should not be an afterthought. This should be planned well in advance. So once you start acquiring customers, how do you retain them? How do you engage them? And how do you make sure that they are your recurring revenue channels? Lastly, focus on operational efficiencies from the beginning. Again, this should not be an afterthought. It should not be that you launched your operations and you started ramping up. Now you realize you have too many people, or you have been a little bit conservative in ramping up, and now you realize that there are less people supporting your business, and you're in constant need of getting more and more people on board. So that's where proper planning goes in, and you need to ensure that your demands are clearly met with the resources that you have on board. Let's take a few quick examples of key revenue drivers across these different brands. Now, let's take the example of Netflix. In case of Netflix, they measure their revenue as revenue per subscriber. So it's one product, one subscription service, and that's how they clearly measure what the revenue is. All right, so let's take a few examples of key revenue drivers across different brands. The first example is of Netflix. Now, in case of Netflix, so they have one single product, which is the subscription service, and it makes sense for them to measure revenue per subscriber. There could be an additional criteria to this, which is revenue per subscriber per geo. For example, they have different pricing in the US, Canada, or Asian countries or Europe. So they might want to measure that separately. But essentially, it's a revenue per subscriber for them. In case of AWS, it is revenue per customer. So revenue per customer, because one customer may opt for different services, hosting services, storage services, computing power, and so on and so forth. So a net total of all these services that a customer subscribes for is something that they measure. In case of Starbucks, it's revenue per customer visit. Now, just pay attention how this is different than revenue per customer, because revenue per customer is one single customer and how much revenue that you generate from them over a period of time. But in case of Starbucks, they are measuring revenue per customer visit. There could be different reasons why they are doing that. We are not going to get into that. In case of Apple, they measure this as revenue per user, which is clear because one Apple user may have different products, MacBooks, iPhones, accessories, and so on and so forth. In case of Tesla, it's pretty straightforward. It's revenue per unit. Now, obviously, there are different models, so they might measure that differently, and different markets are selling at different price points. Now, there are some key drivers which enable the key revenue drivers, right? Which is quality, the first one. In case of your quality of your product or service, that has a direct impact on your key revenue driver. Other could be innovation, how frequently you're innovating, especially for a devices category or for a physical product category, how frequently you're innovating and bringing in new models and so on and so forth. Technology also plays a key part in terms of enabling your customer experience, enabling your operations, and so on and so forth. And in some cases, technology itself is the product, right? It could be AI products or some other. In case of AWS, the entire stack is based on tech. The next option could be premium versus freemium or premium versus lesser premium products. So that's one strategy that some brands adopt. Retention, like we discussed before, is key to understanding and implementing your retention strategies from the beginning, and it should not be an afterthought. Marketing, again, plays a key role, not just to drive initial revenue, but also long-term sustainability, brand presence, and so on and so forth. And lastly, what value you're giving to your end customers. Every customer needs to see value in what they are buying. And, if they don't see that value over a period of time, they may end up canceling your product or service. Now, the sweet spot is where all these three circles meet, which is passion, your capability, your economic factor, and the hedgehog concept is a combination of all these three, right? Now, it's not an instant concept. It's not something that you will get it on day one. It's a process. It's an ideation process. It's a disciplined thought and action. And over a period of time, you'll realize what your true hedgehog is. So you need to find the right alignment between your passion, your capability, and your financial sustainability. And that's what will get you to the hedgehog concept. Let's take two quick examples here in terms of case studies. The first one is that of Kroger. Now, when Kroger started, their passion was to provide high quality groceries, and they wanted to make this affordable and accessible to everybody. And also, there's an aspect of fresh food that they started. So that was their passion. In terms of the strengths, they had efficiently laid out their supply chain. They've cracked the code on that and the store operations, and they were one of the leading companies in private label products. Now, in terms of their economic factors, they initially started measuring this as revenue per subscriber, and with the expansion of different stores across the country, they started measuring this as revenue per square foot. Also, the rewards program is something that truly differentiates Kroger from everybody else. Walmart, for example, may offer cheaper prices in certain products, but the rewards program of Kroger really stands out. At the end of your purchase, you're swiping your card and you're seeing an instant discount getting applied on your bill. Usually it may even be 5 or 10% in some cases. And that kind of really plays onto the customer's mind, where they see real discounts being applied on the bill, and not just in the stores, but also in gas stations and so on, right? So that's a marketing strategy that has worked really well for them. Now, in terms of outcome, Kroger has been one of the largest supermarket chains in the US for a long time now, and they continue to maintain their position. Let's take the second example from a financial services industry, and that too from a core banking. Wells Fargo is one example. When they started, their passion was to deliver exceptional financial services to their customers, and they were one of the first ones who started the concept of wealth creation and wealth building. So they started all these different segments which educated their customers more and helped them with financial planning. So they were one of the first ones to do that. In terms of the strength, their strength lied in community banking, and they also started providing digital banking at a very, very early stage. So that is something that they tapped on early, adoption of technology and digital banking. In terms of their economic drivers, they measure this as revenue per customer relationship. So as we know, one customer can offer different products, savings account, checking account, loan products. So they measure the economic driver as revenue per relationship. And in terms of outcome, they are one of the most profitable banks in the US for decades now. A word of caution here is that we need to avoid some common pitfalls that we might get into when we start building on our businesses from a hedgehog concept perspective. Pitfall number one is that we need to stop confusing goals with passions, right? Passion is something that comes from within, and that's something that you want to achieve in the long run. And to achieve that passion or your vision, you set goals. Now, goals are periodic, they are timely, and goals should never be confused with passions, right? Goals could even change, they could be even dynamic. So that's something that you need to really differentiate and figure it out. Pitfall number two is you need to stop overestimating your capabilities without external validation. Now, I might think I have a brilliant idea, but without testing it out and without seeing that initial acceptance, you will never be able to scale that business, right? So finding your first 50, first 100 customers, getting concrete feedback from them, and then tweaking your products and services to cater to that feedback, that's something that you need to crack on early in the early stages of your business. So do not overestimate your capabilities. Try and understand what works, what doesn't work. So you need to have some external validation. There are various ways that you can do it. It could be through family and friends, or it could be a circle of trusted businesses that are working together, like an incubator, but you need to have external validation. Pitfall number three is focusing on short term metrics over long term sustainability. It's similar to your goals and the passion example. So you have certain long term objectives in mind. Stop focusing on short term metrics or short term revenue channels, which are giving you a lot of revenue, customer base, but it's not aligning with your long term vision. So you need to really differentiate those two. You should not ignore both. It's good to have that. It could be timely, it could be campaign specific, but then you need to clearly focus on your long-term strategy and long-term sustainability on whatever strategies that you try and implement. There are some other limitations of Hedgehog, and we'll quickly cover this one by one. Firstly, it's oversimplification of focus. Now, focusing on one area doesn't really mean that you ignore all the other valuable opportunities or innovation that you will come up with or your team will come up with. A quick example of this could be Nokia. Nokia really missed the boat on touchscreen phones when they initially started, and when they eventually decided to do it, it was just too late for them, right? Second is resisting to change. Now, again, there are some businesses who operate like a hedgehog, and they may become so rigid in their processes, that the thoughts and the strategies, that they really struggle to pivot when the market dynamic changes or some new opportunity arises. A quick example of here could be that of Blockbuster. Now, Blockbuster started as DVD rentals, and they really ignored the digital streaming business, unlike Netflix, which tapped on it at the right time, and they really capitalized on this. The next one is assumption of permanence. So as the market evolves, the company which excels on one particular area today may not sustain that over a period of time and may not remain relevant in the future. A case study or a quick example of this could be Kodak. Kodak initially focused on film photography with those films that could go in. So Kodak initially focused on film photography, and they really missed the boat on rise of digital cameras. Now eventually they did catch up, but again it was a little bit late and they lost time to market compared to some of the other competitors. Lastly, neglecting diverse thinking. Now as you build your teams, there could be different roles that people are playing, and they might come with again different ideas, different thought processes, diverse thinking, different approaches to do similar things, and so on and so forth. They all will be aligned with your company objectives, your long term vision, your short term vision, but the ways of doing that could be different. Now, you need to understand and address that. And hedgehog thinking may limit creativity in certain cases. They may make you less adaptable by excluding those diverse approaches. So that's something that you need to take care of initially before your processes become so rigid that there's no scope for changes. So lastly, what's the right approach you need to take? You have seen both examples. You have seen the hedgehog strategy, you have seen the fox strategy. What really makes sense for your business? Now, that's a question that you need to ask yourself and determine the answer based on the stage of the business that you're in. Now, if you're in an early stage startup, it makes sense to go the hedgehog way, in which you have a singular focus, you have clarity of purpose, you are focusing all your expertise in bringing or building that core model, and you have a long-term strategic vision. So for early stage startups, it may make sense to go the hedgehog route. And then as you grow, you stabilize, and now it's time for expanding. You need to then adopt a fox-like mindset. You need to be adaptable, you need to be agile, embrace diverse thinking, foster creativity and innovation between your team, your organization, and you respond to changes pretty quickly. So if there's a change in market dynamics, you need to tap that on early and you need to address that early on before it becomes a problem. Or if you see a lot of innovations happening in your space and you need to kind of launch new products or new services, that's something that you need to act upon quickly before you become irrelevant, right? So depending on the stage of the business you are in, you can either be a hedgehog or a fox, and the safest way to go is go hybrid. So start with the hedgehog, but eventually turn into a fox.